fresh power. I mean, you know, it would have been a shame to do the old stamp.
Yeah.
It had to be the new one.
Yeah, you were here recently. I didn't get to meet you. You went to my church.
I sure did. Met your pastor. He's a wonderful man.
He is. He has guided me well. When I talk to kids at church, when I talk to kids in their classrooms, there are a lot of young people who don't think they should vote at all anymore. They feel that you're all the same. Why are you not the same?
I'm not the same because I'm talking about things in this election that I've been working on for years that I really care about. I was in South Central LA 3 years before the riot occurred. I came out here, and all the politicians always go to Hollywood to meet the movie stars and the entertainers, you know, to raise money. And I gave a speech here 3 years ago, and I asked to go to South Central LA and meet with people from UNO and SCOC, those community organizations, because I could see how terrible it was and how things could get out of hand. I met with a dozen sixth graders about my daughter's age who told me their biggest fear in life was being shot going to and from school. I mean, and the reason those kids should vote is that this country's been around for more than 200 years because more than half the time the people have been right and have elected the kind of leadership we needed to move our country through crisis periods. And we're in trouble now. We got a lot of problems. And the only way the people can have a say is when they're in the driver's seat. You're in the driver's seat at election time. If you don't get in the car, you can't drive.
Yeah. In South Central... Yes. In South Central LA, we had our riots. Everybody knows about it. I've always said that that was just the spark, this Rodney King situation. That was the spark that lit the flame, but there's a problem there. Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand why that happened?
I think I understand some of why it happened. A teacher told me after it occurred, when I was here with your Congresswoman Maxine Waters in her home, this teacher said to me, now, after we cleaned up this mess that the riots caused, let's clean up the mess that caused the riots.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the best one-liner to describe where we ought to be going. You got millions of people in this country today who just don't feel connected to the life the rest of us want them to live. I mean, you tell them to register and vote, get an education, and go to work, and they say, may not have a job, but if I deal drugs, I can make money. You tell them that they ought to register and vote, and they say, why? I'll still be unsafe on my streets. You tell them to register and vote, and they look at most people in South Central LA. They obeyed the law. They didn't loot, they didn't burn, they didn't riot, they didn't steal. But a lot of them are still living below the poverty line, even though they're working 40 hours a week. So there are real problems there that have divorced a whole lot of Americans from the rest of us. And I think what this election's about, in a way, is reconnecting more folks to the American dream, making them feel like they're a part of our community, and making them feel that tomorrow can be better than today. There are too many people that don't feel part of the community and that are convinced that tomorrow won't be better than today. And you know, I hardly ever meet an American who's not worried about something about the future.
Yeah. You know, when I think about racism, I always, as a black man, I always think about the racism I experienced. During the riots, I realized that there are a lot of kinds of racism we're suffering from. Racism against a lot of different peoples. We all hate each other for something. You know, we noticed the Korean situation. We noticed the anger at just white faces, no matter who they were. We've always seen the hostility towards black faces, no matter who they are. How do we deal with racism in America, because it's getting out of hand?
I think we got to do two things. First of all, we got to find ways for people to talk to each other again on a regular, consistent basis, not just across racial lines, but across income lines. That is, you and I can live in an integrated society, but it'd be a fairly narrow stratum. But if you go to South Central LA or most places in America, most working people and low-income people, they don't have the kind of interracial contacts that people who are in a stronger income group have. So you've got to have basic contacts. Second thing we got to realize is that a lot of the racism that was raging in Los Angeles dealt with what people don't do rather than what they do. People that feel like don't even exist to people of other races till they walk in a department store and people follow them around to make sure they don't steal anything. But day in and day out, they get up, they trudge through their lives, they live in substandard housing on unsafe streets, they work their guts out, they fall further behind. Nobody even knows they're there until there's a riot. So I think that in the 90s, this whole business of economic empowerment has got to be at the center of the civil rights movement. You've got to have a lot of the problems just relate to, like the tensions between the African-American and the Korean community. I talked to a lot of black folks who are convinced that the Koreans get preferential treatment at banks.
For loans, etc.
For loans. But what they don't know is those folks have an entrepreneurial culture. They work together. They loan each other money. They come out of a culture that favors small businesses. Most of the black families that moved to Los Angeles, when they did, came out of the South and came here for manufacturing jobs. When the manufacturing jobs went away, there was only small business, and nobody stepped in and said, here's how you get a loan. We're going to make sure that the loans are made in this community. We're going to make sure you learn how to manage these businesses and create markets. None of that was ever done. So I think a lot of the problem is these folks are just invisible to each other until they raise hell, and you can't run a country that way. We've got to know we're around all the time.
Yeah. Let's take a quick commercial and come right back with Governor Bill Clinton.
I thought it was wrong. I think he has a right to hold high standards of personal behavior and to think what he will about right and wrong, but my whole idea is that we don't have a person to waste in this country and that we should make maximum use of everybody's talents. And I don't even know how he proposes to know about the private lives of the people that he would hire in the federal government. Is he going to hire investigators and figure out, what's going on in their lives? I just thought it was something better left unsaid. And I also believe that this is a fundamentally tolerant but not a permissive society. We got to be tolerant. We're a different group of people. This is the most diverse country on earth. And we need everybody. We need everybody. We're all in this together. Let me just give you an example. I think it was terrible that that woman who won a Bronze Star in the Tet Offensive in Vietnam was kicked out of the National Guard because she said she was a lesbian. She gave a lot to this country, and I think she should have been allowed to serve. Now, I know that my view may be unpopular, but that's the way I feel. I think there ought to be a presumption in this country that we need everybody we can get to perform to the maximum of their God-given capacities. That's why I work so hard on a good economic program. That's why I believe so strongly in education. And so I come from this in a different way. I want to include people. I don't want to exclude people.
Okay. When I look at you on paper, I mean, it's like the perfect guy. Rhodes Scholar, youngest governor. Tell me about your flaws. What are your shortcomings?
We don't have enough time. We'd have to have a bunking party if you wouldn't listen to my flaws. I have a lot of shortcomings. I think one of them is, even at this age, I was first elected governor when I was your age.
See, that's embarrassing. He was governor, and I'm like, let's get busy.
Hey, let's get busy ought to be the motto of this country right now. But but even now, after all these years, I still sometimes work hard instead of smart. That is, I'm a workaholic. I'm always churning and doing things. And sometimes I lose the forest for the trees. Sometimes you can do so many things that you don't do enough. I think at the end of this campaign, a lot of people may not know exactly what I want to do as governor, as president, because I got so many ideas. My mind's always churning, and I think I need to learn to focus my comments better so I can communicate with people who don't know me very well. Yeah. And I need to always learn that you have so little time. There is so precious little time that you have to really be like a laser beam with your words and your actions. You got to really focus. You got to have that kind of mental discipline that sometimes still my workaholic tendencies don't permit me to have. I think that's one problem.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I always think that everything can be worked out too. Sometimes you can't work everything out. You just got to cut it.
Yeah.
And you got to know when to cut it and when to work things out. And that's something I've done a lot of work on, trying to make sure I overcome that weakness.
Speaking of focusing and communicating, I know you've been through this a billion times, but can we get into the smoking the joint thing again?
That's why I played saxophone. You see, you have to blow into it, so you have to inhale with a saxophone or you die. That's how I learned to inhale, playing my saxophone. You blow out, and then you have to inhale. Now, hey, I tried.
One for Bill.
Hey, I tried to do it. I just couldn't. I wasn't trying to get off the hook, you know. I was just making a nervous remark.
Okay, let's go, because I've heard different people discuss it, and I've done my jokes. Okay, you got the joint in your hand.
I bet you burned me bad.
No, I'm saying, okay, somebody says, you know, that word EAR, you all heard it in college, ear. And,
That's what happened. That's exactly what happened. That's what happened.
Somebody says, ear. And then what do you do at that point?
I took it, and I tried to smoke it just like a cigarette. But I'd never smoked a cigarette before.
Mm-hmm. And you're not a drinker either, right?
No, well, I never had a drink till I was 22. I do now a little bit, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I did my best. I mean, I tried, but I just couldn't inhale it. I mean, I wasn't trying to get a good conduct medal for saying I didn't inhale. I was just nervously pointing out that it was another one of those things I tried to do and failed at in life. I gave it. I was 22 or 23 years old. I gave it my very best shot.
Yeah.
I mean, I really tried. I just blew it.
I know how it is dealing with the press. If you could explain it over again the first time, would you do it any differently?
Yeah, I'd have just said yes. But you know, but here's the deal. When a politician says something, if you're in politics, the cynicism about politicians is so great. People thought, well, this guy calculated this whole answer, and he calculated it so that he thought, well, maybe you won't burn me quite as bad if I say I didn't inhale. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. They asked me a question I didn't know they were going to ask, and I gave an honest answer. And that I didn't inhale was a nervous afterthought. I was sort of laughing about it after 22 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all that was going on. I just sort of laughing in my mind about it. But I got beat up about it because everybody thought I calculated this answer. You know, maybe I should be more calculating than I am. But, you know, if you folks are never going to get good politicians, really good public officials, if all you want is somebody that calculates every word they say, every deed they do, and their whole life becomes like a robot or an automaton, you know. I did something when I was younger. I told the truth about it. And I made a mess of telling about it because I guess I'm still kind of embarrassed about it after all these years. Yeah. But it is not a big deal, and it was made into a federal case. I got more publicity on that than my idea about how to send every kid in America to college who wants to go, which I think is more important to the election and to the future of this country.
I read that you are contemplating raising taxes possibly for people who make $200,000 or more.
You'll have to pay more if I
Yeah, I'm mad about that. Why don't you expound on that and talk a little bit about what you will do for the economy? That's part of the LA riots and some of the other frustrations all over this country.
Absolutely. A big part of California's problems. You've lost 500,000 jobs in California in 2 years. Your state government's broke, $11 billion in debt. You're cutting back on education when you ought to be increasing investment in education to prepare all these kids for the future they need to live. So, what my theory is that we've got to increase our investment in this country. After World War II, we rebuilt Europe and Japan. After the Cold War, we've got this marvelous window of opportunity when we can rebuild America, and we better get after it. And we got to do it. The only way you ever rebuild a country is to invest in your people, in their jobs, their education, and their health care. So my idea is that first we ought to take every dollar we're cutting the defense budget by, every dollar, and invest it in building an economy for the 21st century. In California, what does that mean? Build high-speed rail networks. Don't buy the trains from Europe or Japan. Build them here. Build short-haul aircraft. Build modern waste recycling systems. Build a modern fiber optics network. Put millions of people to work building a rich country for tomorrow. Do it with the defense cuts. Second thing, We need some more money to invest in education. Every poor child in South Central LA should be in a Head Start program. The poor school districts, they ought to have elementary counselors in the schools to deal with those kids that bring problems to the front door. And small classes in the early grades. There ought to be a computer in every classroom in America. The kids that don't go to college ought to have 2 years of apprenticeship training so they can get good jobs, not dead-end jobs. That's what our competitors do. And we ought to loan everybody the money that wants to go to college, the money, and let them pay it back later. Now, all of this, believe it or not, in the context of this trillion-dollar budget of ours, is not a great deal. But since we have a deficit that's enormous and that needs to be brought down, I think we have to raise some more money. You can't raise money on the middle class because their taxes went up and their incomes went down in the 80s. People in upper income groups, their incomes went up and their taxes went down. Relax, your taxes will still be lower than they would have been in 1980 when I get done, but you'll have to pay a little more so we can send all these kids to college. It'll be the best money we ever spent. We'll have a stronger economy. All those people that you and your pastor tried to help, if you could tell them when they're 11, 12 years old, look, if you stay straight, you may not make as much money as you would dealing drugs, but you're going to make enough money. You're going to have a good, decent life. You're going to feel good about yourself, and your country is going to make sure that you get the education and training you need. It would be great. And if you could say to them, if you go to college, you can pay the loan back. We'll pay your way to college, but we'll pay it back. You can, either as a percentage of your income when you go to work, or even better, let's make a Peace Corps here at home. Come back to LA and pay your college loan off by giving 2 years of your life as a counselor to kids in trouble, as a nurse in a public health clinic, as a police officer on the block, as a teacher. You think about it. A lot of these kids in trouble, they're never the most important person in the world to anybody except the people they're in the gangs with. So we got to give them a good gang to be a part of, and you got to have some personal connection. So anyway, you have to pay a little more, but not a lot more, and enough to invest in our people again. That's what we got to do.
If it helps our youth, I'm down with it. I'll be right back with Bill Clinton. Well, you all know this lady. Yes. The strength beside the man. Not behind anymore, but beside. Through all this controversy, have you ever found yourselves at home fighting, honestly?
No. Not about anything important. We fight about what movie we want to see.
Yeah.
You know.
This is the only movie we're going to see for a month, and you're going to make me see this crazy cheap thrills movie? You want to go see Lethal Weapon 3 when we've got all these other movies on? That's the kind of stuff we fight about.
Because, you know, it's hard. I mean, okay, it's hard to think that you never at some point said, who is Jennifer? You know, who the hell is she? And it's like, you know, I mean...
I know who she is. I mean, I know who she is.
And you know what her problem is?
She's got lots of problems.
Yeah. Through all the pressure and things you've been through, have you ever thought about quitting?
No.
Really?
No. You know, I would have quit if I just wanted to live in the White House or go to Camp David on the weekends. But if that were the choice, I would gladly stay home where I am with the job I've got and the life I've got. It's a lot better life in many ways on a much more human scale. I got into this race because I thought this country was going down the tubes and we ought to change it. And I stayed in it because I thought I could be a force for change. And I wanted the voters to make up their mind. If the voters say, hey, we think some other person be a better president, I will go home a happy man to the life that I've got. It's a wonderful life. But I would have been a gutless wonder to quit over things I thought were unfair and insubstantial in the face of the convictions that I have about what we ought to do to change the country. So no, I never thought about quitting. This country doesn't need a quitter, and the licks that I've taken are nothing compared to the licks most Americans take. Look at what those people in South Central LA are going through. That's a lot tougher than a few days of bad publicity. I mean, if you can't take a few licks, you got no business being president. It's a tough job. You got to be a tough guy.
Yeah. Wow. Have you kind of Like, and this is something that I heard a political analyst talking about recently. He said you kind of were, I used the word chilling out. He said you were pulling back a little bit. You've been instructed not to say as much or be as outspoken. No?
I've heard that, but I never know who says it. I think it's wishful thinking on the part of some people.
Yes.
I want to tell you something. I thought what you did the night after the LA riots was the way television ought to be. I was so impressed, yeah.
It was a wonderful show.
It was not
watched it all.
I mean, it was not only a great show, it was honest, and it gave people a chance to connect with each other, what you and Bill were talking about earlier. And it used television in a positive way, not just reporting from a distance, not just pointing fingers, but involving people and letting those of us who were at home watching feel that, you know, we had some role, we had some say too. I was real pleased.
You know, see, we gotta stay involved every day. After the fires burn out, we can't allow our involvement to burn out. A few weeks before the riots, I had been on the Hill, invited by Louis Stokes to talk about gangs and violence. I'm heavily involved in a lot of those issues. What do we do about the gangs? And what do we do about the violence in our inner cities, the black-on-black crime? How do we stop it?
Well, if there were a simple answer, it'd be done already. I think you got to start with a safe streets strategy. The cities that are safer are those that have neighborhood policing, where the people that live in neighborhoods look at the police as their friends. They see them every day. The police know the kids that are in trouble or about to be. They work together to keep harmony and peace. We need to help those policemen by giving those kids something else to do, more one-on-one relations with successful adults. And when they do get in trouble, instead of sending them off to jail the first time, they ought to be kept in community boot camps where they can do community service work, have discipline and drug treatment and education. And I think we ought to pass the Brady bill and do some other things to get some of these guns off the street, too, and out of the hands of these kids. So you need a safe street. Then you got to have something for the kids to say yes to. You got to. Everybody wants to be in a gang. I mean, everybody here is in a gang. If you go to your church, it's a gang. It's just a good gang.
Yeah.
Makes you feel good to be there on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
We are social animals. We have to be part of something bigger than ourselves. So you got to take those gangs and give them some ways to be winners as gangs, or give people good gangs to be a part of. We've got to give these kids something to say yes to. The LA Conservation Corps ought to be a national model, and it ought to be dramatically expanded for young people to work in ways that get them out of their own lives and their problems and get them into working with other people and doing good things. Those are the kinds of things we got to do. We've got to change lives from the outside in and from the inside out. And there's no simple strategy. The government can do some things, but people on the streets have to do others.
Yeah, the reason I ask you questions like this, because these aren't just black questions. Mr. Crime, Mr. Frustration own cars now, and they'll be coming to the suburbs real soon.
Oh, listen.
That's why we have to solve the inner city problems.
I was in Macomb County, Michigan, which is virtually all white, outside Detroit. All the white folks went out there. That's the home of the Reagan Democrats. You know, the Democratic Party left me. I'm tough and conservative now. I was there a couple of days after a 15-year-old white boy had shot another one in the schools. Yeah. This is not just about race. It's about ethics and education and economics, and it's about kids being divorced from the life we want them to live. There's all these disconnections. It's like people's circuits is shorted out. And people like you, at least you're reaching out and trying to touch them again. And what you got to do is to empower people like all of the rest of us, people that aren't famous or rich, but still have incredible power to touch other people's lives.
Yeah. It's all of our problems. I don't have a lot of time left, but Marla, just give me a couple seconds. I'm going to let the lady close the segment. Tell young America and anybody in America who's watching why they should vote for this man.
Because he's got the right combination of a great heart and a great mind, and he understands what's at stake in this country. And if he were not convinced that we could do better and that he could inspire people, particularly young people, to feel good about themselves and to be committed again to this country, he wouldn't be in this race. But he is, and he can. And that's what we need more than anything to get America back on the right track.
I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but vote for somebody. This is Hillary. This is Bill, the Clinton family.